Welcome to Continental Lunch, an opportunity to digest the European election campaign and refuel now that 4 days of voting are underway. I'm Jen Copestake, and I'll be joined by CGTN correspondents from across Europe. There they are. As well as our social media surfer, Michael Marillier, to look at what the various parties are serving up. So let's get going and take a quick look at the menu available to European voters. There are 7 broad party groupings in the European Parliament, and most national parties are affiliated to one of them. They're generally listed in order of political flavour. Here they are from left to right, representing left-wing to right-wing groupings. Our starter to whet your appetites before we get to the main course, and to make this complex vote easier to digest, let's first find out what the European elections do and do not mean. Michael, can you break it down for us?
Thanks, Jen. So what exactly is on the plates of European voters in these elections? Well, voters are choosing representatives in Parliament. 720 lawmakers will represent people from across the European Union. States with bigger populations get more representatives. Voters choose between domestic political parties, but as Jen said, once elected, they mostly group together in Parliament with like-minded parties from other nations. The Parliament is responsible for approving laws and holding other parts of the EU accountable. Now, the European Council has a rather different flavour. The Council is comprised of heads of state or heads of government of EU countries. It's supposed to provide the general direction of the EU, but not get too involved in the detail. And then there's another crucial ingredient, the European Commission. The Commission proposes laws based on the European Council's lead. It's also in charge of the day-to-day running of the EU. It's led by a president, in a sense the head chef. This is usually someone who represents the biggest political group in Parliament, but heads of government aren't obliged to follow that tradition. The Council proposes a candidate, yet Parliament has a veto on who runs the kitchen.
Right now, after that delicious starter, we can get stuck into our main course, the meat of our story, which is about people. The politicians, of course, but also the voters. Let us know what you think about the parties and their candidates in the comments. We've picked 7 figures who represent the 7 groupings in the Parliament. We can start with the left. This grouping, sometimes called NGL or Nordic Green Left, includes communist and socialist parties. Now, one of those parties is Spain's Podemos, led by Ione Belarra. Michael, what do we know about Ione?
Thanks, Jen. Ione Belarra's party is hoping to get back on track after its association with a law known as Only Yes Means Yes. It was supposed to curb sexual violence, but a loophole meant that nearly 200 sexual offenders got lighter sentences. Now, Belarra has a strong social media presence with hundreds of thousands of followers. She often puts up images like this, portraying herself not only as a politician, but also a working mother. There she is, playing with her 2 young children. She's also a passionate supporter of Palestine. Spain recognized Palestine as a state last week, but she says it's not enough. In this speech, she called on the Spanish government to sever all ties with Israel. Belarra is also a trained psychologist, and she describes her views as progressive. She's often seen at events that focus on women's rights and equality. Jen?
Thanks so much, Michael, for taking us through that. So let's drop in now to Spain, where our correspondent Ken Brown has just sat down for lunch. Good afternoon, Ken. Now, first, what's on your table? It looks amazing.
Yes, hola Jen, hola Michael, hola everyone. I'm here in Madrid's iconic Plaza Mayor with some Spanish delights. Patatas bravas, calamari, some queso, some cheese, some jamon or Iberian ham, and the tortilla española. This is an obsession here in Spain. The Spanish will argue for hours about the correct texture, about whose mother makes it better. I made the mistake once of saying, oh, come on, it's just eggs and potatoes and a bit of onion. And that was the end of that relationship, Jen. Never underestimate the power of the tortilla española.
Oh, it's a lesson I've learned the hard way as well, Ken. But we're just talking now about Podemos and Ione Belarra. What can you tell us about her image and the policies that she's pushing ahead of this vote?
Yeah, so Belarra, she's 36. She likes to project an image of a young supermom trying to make the world a better place. Her policy offerings are like a big table of lefty tapas. She's a feminist, pro-women's, gay and trans rights, anti-machismo. She wants a more humane immigration policy, action on climate change. Economically, Belarra is true to the anti-austerity roots of Podemos. They're in the tax the rich, not eat the rich camp. The party exploded onto Spain's political scene about 10 years ago, coming from anti-austerity protests. It helped break up Spain's duopoly of the centre-right and the centre-left party in 2015. Podemos became Spain's third biggest political force, but the party's star has very much been on the wane, as Michael mentioned earlier. In 2021, the founder, Pablo Iglesias, he's like this kind of long-haired, left-winged political scientist rebel who once gave the King of Spain a DVD box set of the Game of Thrones. He stepped down as party leader amid a real toxification and fragmentation of Spain's politics. Belarra took over at 33, but in 2022, as we heard, Podemos was really blamed for that deeply flawed law, the CSC, or Yes is Yes consent law, that allowed some sex offenders, or including rapists, to receive shorter sentences, some even to get out of jail early. So since then, Belarra has really been up against it. The left has a new darling. Her name is Yolanda Díaz. She's the leader of the Sumar party. They won 27 seats in the last general elections, while Podemos won just 4. So Belarra really up against it in these European elections in trying to revive the Podemos party and in fending off a far-right surge here in Spain, Jen.
Ken, thank you so much, and we'll be joining you a little bit later on and see how far you've gotten along in that meal. Thanks so much. We'll stay with our groups on the left, and next on our plate, like any balanced meal, we have our Greens, specifically the Greens European Free Alliance, or Greens EFA. Now, this grouping came together 25 years ago in 1999, bringing together two progressive European political families. The MEPs in this grouping come from the Green movement, as well as regionalist political parties and independents. Now, on the EFA side, there's also representation for stateless nations, regions and minorities who are seeking self-determination. Now, one of its two main candidates is Terry Renke, a German politician and co-president of the grouping. So, Michael, what can you tell us about her from her social media profile?
Well, Jen, Terry Renke has been a member of the European Parliament for 10 years. She has a relatively small following on social media, but she knows what she's doing. Here, Renke tweets that the European Union has brought peace and freedom to Europe. She said again and again that far-right groups present a threat. But here she explains what's at stake in simple, easy-to-digest terms. Defend democracy, defend the climate, strengthen Europe. Now, this kind of strategy comes with risk. It may seem like she's telling us to vote for her because she's not somebody else. In other words, the far right. But here she uses a line that features across her social media. We choose courage. This frames her politics in a different light, telling voters that she offers empowerment and action rather than just a response to a threat. Renke also communicates in a very personal way. She tells us she was born on May 9th, or Europe Day. There's a video which features photo and footage of her as a child. This creates the idea that she embodies her politics, that the campaign for European solidarity isn't just a policy, but something embedded in her personality. Jen?
Thanks, Michael. Let's now hear a view from Renke's home country, Germany, where our correspondent Peter Oliver is sitting down for lunch in Berlin. Actually, Peter, it looks like you're standing in your kitchen. So before we get started, what exactly is there on your table or your counter?
Yes, I've been rattling the pots and pans here in Berlin, cooking up some traditional delights from trying to get around the Bundesrepublik as much as I can. Right here, for the main course, we have the Calfsleber, Berlin style, served with onions and apples, and of course, with mashed potato, because everything should be served with mashed potato. A little bit over here, we have the Laugenbrecher from down in Bavaria, one of the biggest states in the Bundesrepublik, and that all washed down with a nice Pilsner from North Rhine-Westphalia.
Wow.
Alcohol-free, naturally.
That's great. I think maybe hold off on the drink until we finish the this part of the lunch, but it looks amazing. Very well done. We're turning now to Terry Ranke. What will she be bringing to the table this election, do you think?
Right, well, Terry Ranke's been in Parliament for 10 years. What's different now than when she first came in is that the Greens are in power here in Germany. Beforehand, they were the opposition. They were able to say, we'll do the things that the current government isn't doing.
Yes.
They're not able to do that at the moment because they're part of the coalition, and as part of that three-way coalition with Olaf Scholz, the Social Democrats, and Christian Lindner's Free Democrats, they've had to make compromises, and in some ways, compromises on green policies. So she's facing quite a bit of backlash there. We heard Michael say that she's gegen rechts, against the right. That's been a big message in this election campaign because we are expecting the right-wing parties to do better than they had done previously. Currently, the Greens are looking likely to lose around 20 seats on the 76 they picked up back in 2019. But what Arika and her Green Party are looking to do is to try and lock in that young vote, because essentially the older generations aren't going to vote for the Greens. They've moved away either to the centre-right CDU, CSU, or to the more far-right alternative for Deutschland parties. Reike and the Greens looking to lock in the Greens, saying we're the party that's going to look after your future.
Thanks so much, Peter. We're going to be coming back to you, so don't enjoy too much of that beer for the moment. Peter Oliver there in Germany. We arrive now at the second oldest political grouping in the European Parliament, which is the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats, or SND. Formed in 1953 as the Socialist Group, it changed its name in 2009. Now, in the current Parliament, its members span 25 of the 27 EU member countries. It's also the grouping with the second highest number of seats. One of its leading figures is Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, who has been in the news recently. Of course, Michael, you've been gleaning his social media profiles. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, Jen. Well, Spain's leader has often been described as a quick thinker and a master of the spoken word. Pedro Sanchez wins lots of praise for his speeches. No surprise then that they feature on his social media platforms. Spain recognized the state of Palestine last week. He delivered that speech in both Spanish and English. He is, in fact, the first Spanish Prime Minister to be fluent in English while in office. He's also nicknamed El Guapo, or the Handsome One. He caused quite a stir during his appearance on Morning Joe in the United States. Some viewers calling him Spain's JFK, a reference to the late US President John F. Kennedy. Now, his appearance is one thing, but his political group may have an image problem. Analysts say around 30% of young men in Spain identify with parties from the right and extreme right. Sanchez has been trying to combat that, posting this clip where he tells voters that he's proud to be on the left, saying it's all about progressive politics. Jen?
Thanks so much, Michael. We can hear more with Ken Brown back in Madrid. Ken, what else can you tell us about Pedro Sanchez and his priorities for Europe?
Yeah, Jen, I mean, Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, known to his supporters as El Guapo, or Mr. Handsome, as we just heard, to his political opponents as, well, things that I can't even repeat on air. He's quite a divisive figure in Spain. People here live their politics like they live their food or their football passionately. The country is polarized, and it's love-hate with Sanchez. The right rages against his policies. There was a lot of anger about how he gave an amnesty to Catalan separatist politicians to get back into power after the last general elections. Now, Sanchez, he knows two things about these European elections. First, voter turnout is traditionally very low, 51% in 2019. Second, they work a little bit like the US midterms. Voters often use them to punish sitting governments. But Mr. Handsome, not just a pretty face, he's very good at rallying his people. His European election strategy frames the right and the far right as the same thing. He calls them extremists who want to tear down Europe's values of openness and tolerance. Now, that strategy worked in the general elections. He's at it again. So Sanchez very good at flipping the tortilla, as they say here in Spain, turning things to his advantage. His wife is currently being investigated on corruption charges. So Sanchez, what did he do? When that broke, he said, he took 5 days out to decide. He said whether it was worth it or not to continue as Spain's Prime Minister. What happened next? His party won the most seats in the Catalan elections. Just yesterday, a Madrid judge called his wife to a hearing. She has to answer questions on July 5th. Sanchez says this is another right-wing election tactic. He wrote another letter on his social media last night and rallies his bases once more. Argentina's President Javier Milei ranted and raved against Sanchez, insulted him, insulted his wife. Sanchez says, look, see, this is what the right wing is. This is what the far right is. Anti-diplomatic, anti-democratic extremists who want to take away your rights and dismantle Europe's post-World War II welfare state. So Sanchez is trying to win over young voters with his progressive policies. He's embraced the memes, the TikTok raccoon called Pedro. When the right started calling him Perro Sanchez, an insult, perro means dog, they flipped that too, and now the socialists call him the big dog. So while Spain's right-wing bloc does lead in the polls right now, look out for Spain's comeback king, Pedro Sanchez.
Ken, thank you so much. We're going to flip our tortilla now, as it were, and move straight to the centre of our lunch table to talk about Renew Europe, the so-called pro-European Parliament party. So they're formally known as the Alliance for Liberals and Democrats for Europe, or the ADLE, and they're closely associated with French President Emmanuel Macron and his Renaissance Party. Michael, the French president is, of course, a very well-known figure internationally. What can you find out more for us?
Well, bonjour, Jen. Emmanuel Macron has a powerful presence on social media. Not surprising, he is, after all, the president of France. But there's a fascinating mixture of content. Here he is, Macron, the statesman, shaking hands with Chinese President Xi Jinping during a state visit last month. This kind of post sets him up as a man with experience, a statesman who can represent Europe on the global stage. Then there's this, Macron, the man who gets results. This post highlights the results of Choose France, a campaign to attract investment and generate jobs. Macron telling his followers that France has become the most attractive investment destination on the continent. And then there's this, Macron, the man of the people. Here he is hosting a question and answer session on Instagram. This kind of content sends a message saying, I have time for ordinary people. I want to make my policies accessible. Clearly, he wants to show them that he understands their needs. And that is, after all, pretty important when you're trying to win an election. So, several sides of Macron on social media, but all of them serving a purpose when it comes to this campaign.
Thanks so much, Michael. So we'll join our correspondent Ross Cullen, who is sitting down for lunch with us in Paris now. Ross, before we begin our questions about Macron, can you tell us what is on your plate there? It looks like you're in a beautiful park.
Bonjour, Jen. We have une tradition here, which might be known as a baguette in the United Kingdom. Obviously, cheese and wine lunch is an institution here in France.
Très délicieux. Now, forgetting our food for just a moment there, we want to hear more about President Macron and his positioning in this election. We heard from Ken Brown there in Spain that Pedro Sanchez, it might be a referendum on his leadership. Could the same be said for France and Emmanuel Macron? Can you tell us how that might affect Renew?
Yeah, certainly it's a real chance for French voters to try to give their thoughts, a bit like a midterm on the government. They know that the results of these elections won't impact the National Assembly here in France. So it is a chance, if you are upset with the direction of the government, to potentially have a protest vote, and that is something that Emmanuel Macron will be concerned about. He does certainly want to try to position his party as the pro-European party, to highlight the things that are dear to him, that are close to his party's aims, such as trying to make Europe a leader when it comes to digital technologies and artificial intelligence, try to improve and strengthen European defence, try to improve and strengthen European manufacturing and industry. And so the heart of that, the pro-European policies, are really at the central plank of his campaign.
Thanks, Ross. I hope that you're going to get some cutlery and maybe a plate and a glass for your wine there in Paris before we see you again. Ross Cullen for now. Many thanks and enjoy your lunch. So, we'll cross now to the right of our centre of the table. The largest party in the current parliament is the European People's Party, or the EPP. In fact, this has been the largest party in the parliament for the last 25 years. The EPP brings together Christian Democratic, Conservative and Liberal Conservative MEPs. And to the head chef herself, the current president of the European Commission is Ursula von der Leyen. So she comes from the EPP. Now, this German-born physicist was also, of course, a high-profile member of former Chancellor Angela Merkel's cabinet in Germany and most recently served as the Federal Minister of Defense. Very impressive, Michael. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, absolutely, Jen. Well, Ursula von der Leyen is at the centre of European politics. She's had to tackle critical issues as president of the European Commission. First of all, the COVID pandemic, then the conflict in Ukraine, and of course, a cost of living crisis. She's used social media to remind people of her experience and expertise. Her key message: I am standing with all my experience and determination for a strong Europe. Now, Russia's conflict with Ukraine began less than 3 years after she was chosen as president. She's made security a big part of her campaign, saying she'll boost Europe's ability to manufacture weapons and promote common defense projects. Her message here: vote for a strong Europe that dares to act. She's also focused on the youth, leading a program looking at the future of young Europeans. This video from her campaign shows young people from across the continent urging others to vote. And that really sums up her social media strategy. She's saying, I've got the credentials, my party knows what it's doing, but we're also in touch with the people, and we can change Europe for the better. Jen?
Thanks so much, Michael. We're going to return now to the kitchen in Berlin, where Peter Oliver is standing by. Peter, Ursula von der Leyen is hoping to be re-elected to serve a second term. What can you tell us about how she's shoring up support for key policies within her party and also outside the party?
Well, interestingly enough, of course, the European Commission president isn't elected by the people that vote. It's elected by the people that get voted in by the people that vote. So von der Leyen herself is actually campaigning ahead of time for those that she expects will fill the European Parliament. And I can tell you that type of race contains more twists and turns than your average pretzel. And it is a little bit like trying to organise which guests you're going to bring to a dinner party, or essentially choosing what you're going to have from the menu. Because what it does seem at the moment is von der Leyen's plate, a little bit like mine here, will be lacking greens. She has said that she will try and embrace the right wing, not the far, far right, but the ECR, the group that includes Giorgia Meloni's Brothers of Italy, that I'm sure we'll hear more about a little later on. That has prompted the Greens here in Germany to say, if you do a deal with those, we're not going to be involved with you and vote for you to be Commission President. Now, there's also assaults coming from within that tight-knit group of those at the top of the EU institutions. There's headlines here in Germany at the moment about a two-footed tackle. You would think the European Football Championships were coming up or something like that. But a two-footed tackle put in on von der Leyen by EU Council President Charles Michel. The former Belgian Prime Minister has accused, or at least has, if we understand, has leaked out, his team has leaked out messages that von der Leyen has been too close to Israel in the conflict in Gaza. That's something that von der Leyen denies. She says she's just looking for a peaceful resolution to that conflict. But there is clearly already moments and movements of people trying to jostle ahead for that role of Commission President. The EPP, her party, will almost certainly, it would take a huge upset if they weren't the largest bloc in the European Parliament next time around. They will put von der Leyen forward as their candidate. However, just the votes of the EPP aren't enough. She will need to do deals elsewhere. If she goes with the right, the Greens are going to say no. If she goes with the Greens, it might not be enough votes. Von der Leyen has made a career out of being a politician that knows which way the political weather is blowing before it blows. If she's thinking of siding with the right, expect it to go that way when the votes are counted.
It's absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much, Peter, for that. We'll be back with you later, so please do stay with us. We're moving further now to the right, as Peter was just saying. Right of the EPP, we have the European Conservatives and Reformists, or the ECR. So this is a broadly Eurosceptic group with parties including Alliance Germany, Dutch Reformed Party, and as we heard, the Brothers of Italy, led by Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Now, Giorgia Meloni is, again, one of our extremely well-known figures across the world. What can you tell us, Michael? Is there anything that you found out from her social media profiles?
Well, Jen, Giorgia Meloni's European political bloc has struggled on her home turf. Italy has 76 seats in the European Parliament. Just 10 belong to the ECR. Meloni and her group will be aiming to convince Italians that it's time for change, and you see that in her campaign. She addressed thousands of supporters on Saturday, delivering a speech at Rome's Piazza del Popolo, or the Square of the People. The title of that speech, Italy Changes Europe. Here she makes a link between Italy's national pride and the election, saying the eyes of the world are upon us and it's our job to demonstrate what we're capable of. Long live Italy. Now, national pride is a thread across her social media. Italy celebrated its Republic Day this weekend, Meloni thanking those who make it strong, unique and respected in the world. That kind of message helped win the Italian election, her party's support surging from less than 5% in 2018 to nearly 26% just 4 years earlier. She said she would also represent Italians who felt their ideas were relegated to the sidelines. That idea is still front and centre. Meloni saying Italy's Prime Minister should be elected directly. You can see that in that tweet there. Here she takes aim at other parties, suggesting they're afraid of what voters might choose. Jen?
Thanks so much, Michael. And for more on Giorgia Meloni, we're going to go live to Rome to join our correspondent Giles Gibson. Giles, we cannot imagine that you have anything except something absolutely delicious on your table there, in beautiful setting.
I do. I have some olives, of course, a classic Italian sort of lunch dish or any time of the day, really. I've got some prosciutto ham and some mozzarella, and of course we're getting into the really hottest parts of the year here in Rome, so I've got some acqua frizzante, some fizzy water just to keep me hydrated over the course of lunchtime. Buonissimo.
And what can you tell us now about the policies that are most important to Prime Minister Meloni and her success with the ECR in the European elections?
Well, look, going around Rome at the moment, it's almost impossible not to come across an image or a billboard showing Giorgia Meloni's face, you know, on a street corner or indeed on the back of a bus. We were actually at the closing rally of the Brothers of Italy party here in Rome on Saturday in the Piazza del Popolo, and I was speaking to some of her supporters, asking why they are such big fans of Meloni, and I did expect them to talk a lot about immigration, because that's something that Giorgia Meloni has talked about for years and years in terms of her political career, but they also said to me that they want to see her reforming Europe from the inside out, although it was a little bit hard to get them to then describe what they actually meant by that, what they were looking for in terms of reforming the European Union. It's worth noting that the Democratic Party, the opposition party here in Italy, has been criticising Giorgia Meloni's stance on migration very strongly during this campaign. They've had these billboards up with just a shot of the Mediterranean Sea, not with any ships or anything like that, and then it just says Il mare non un cimitero, so the sea, not a cemetery, sort of a criticism of the Meloni government's hardline migration policies there. Interestingly, and very unusually for a national leader, Giorgia Meloni is actually running as a candidate herself in these elections. That's actually something that's pretty common here in Italy. Really, the leaders of all the major political parties, the opposition Democratic Party, as well as Meloni's coalition partners, are all doing the same thing, really sort of personally involving themselves in this campaign. Now, Giorgia Meloni is not going to actually take up her seat in the European Parliament, but I think, as we've been discussing, she could have this kingmaker role once these elections wrap up in terms of her position in Brussels, and that's because the European Conservatives and Reformists, the ECR grouping that her party are a part of, they could end up with 75 seats in the European Parliament. That's according to the latest polls. Now, you might think for Ursula von der Leyen, who's in the centre-right EPP, that the easiest way for her to get to keeping her job, to get across the line, would simply be to sort of form a right-wing coalition, right? So the EPP and the ECR clubbing together. There's a couple of problems with that. The first one is that they simply, according to the latest polls, are not going to get enough votes between them, the EPP and the ECR, to get across the line. But also what's been happening is figures on the left of European politics who have actually previously supported Ursula von der Leyen have been saying, look, if you do a deal with Giorgia Meloni and the ECR, then we are not going to support you. So at the moment, I think as we go into these polls, we'll have to see how it all plays out. Giorgia Meloni, or rather Ursula von der Leyen, is really between a rock and a hard place in terms of whether she stays close to Giorgia Meloni or she creates a little bit of distance.
Thank you very much, Giles. We're going to hear now more about that possible alliance that you're discussing of the far right which is our final party on the far right of the spectrum, Identity and Democracy, or ID, launched at the last elections in 2019. Now, this grouping represents nationalist, populist, and firmly Eurosceptic members, including the Danish People's Party and France's National Rally, whose leading candidate is 28-year-old Jordan Bardella. Now, Michael, there must be a lot of social media presence with Jordan Bardella. What can you tell us?
Bonjour, Jen. Jordan Bardella's campaign focuses on what he says are France's problems. He uses social media to criticize the government for failing to deal with those problems, and he positions himself as the solution. Here he says he's the candidate of a France which can no longer take its share of immigration, a reference to the EU's policy of requesting states to accept a certain number of migrants. This kind of talk is common among far-right groups, but Bardella frames it in a strategic way, saying he's the candidate of a France which wants to remain France. He positions himself as someone who's there to protect the country, someone who's strong on immigration because France has no real choice. Bardella also paints a picture of a country in decline. He says here that he wants to address all people whose hearts bleed when they look at the state of France. Now, Bardella rose to fame as the protege of Marine Le Pen, the former president of the National Rally. We've seen several videos showing the two of them together at campaign events. The question is, will he position himself as his own man? Right now, it seems like he's leaning on Le Pen's reputation. Her image features in some of his campaign material, even though it calls on voters to support Bardella. Jen?
Thanks, Michael. Now let's return to hear more about this to Paris and join our correspondent Ross Cullen. Ross, if the election is a referendum on President Macron's popularity with Renew, what does it mean for Bardella and the prospects of the far right?
Well, they've been leading the polls ever since the start of the election campaign. Jen, certainly it seems that the far right will win the greatest number of seats, return the greatest number of MEPs. It would be a shock, indeed, if they weren't actually the biggest party based on the polls so far. We do know that Jordan Bardella has been trying to drive this new image of the far right, sticking to their links with populism and nationalism, but they are still at that core, that anti-immigration party who do want to restrict the free movement of migrants within Europe. They have softened their stance on the euro. They no longer want to leave the European single currency, but they are expected to pick up a lot of protest votes as they do have that populism, that strand of the anti-elite trying to speak for what they describe as the common people at the heart of their message.
Thanks so much, Roz, and please don't go anywhere. We'll be with you right away in a moment. So it's time for our dessert, and any good European lunch would not be complete without this course. And for today, we're going to serve up a quiz, which our correspondents from across Europe will be taking part in. Guys, I hope you're ready for this quiz. It's going to test the knowledge of some of the lesser-known ingredients of the countries that you are representing today. And if you're watching online, please do play along by putting your answers in the comments section. So to start this quiz, I'll go through the rules. We're going to have paper plates. Please hold up your paper plate. First, hold it to the camera, the blank side, but you'll write on them an A, B, C, or D to correspond with the answer for the quiz. If you're ready, we'll get started. Question 1. Brussels is the heart of the European Union, but which of these foods is not associated with the Belgian capital? Is it A, waffles, B, sprouts, C, mussels, or D, ice cream? Let's get your answers written down. You have about 10 seconds to do that. When you're all ready, please hold up your paper plates with your answer towards your chest, okay? Peter's ready. Giles is ready in Rome. Ken is thinking about it. Okay, everybody's ready. So on 3, turn around your plates. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we've gone D, ice cream, and sorry, Peter, I can't quite see your plate. D, okay, B. So the answer was D, which is ice cream. So B, what made you think of Sprouts over there in Paris, Ross?
Because trout, I guess, is a fish. I wouldn't associate that with
Sprouts.
Brussels, and I guess
It's unfair,
ice
Ross.
cream perhaps more.
It might be the translation, but it was actually Brussels sprouts, not trout. Would that have changed your answer?
Oh, well, of course, sprouts. But yes, yeah, absolutely. If I'd heard sprouts, but I heard trout.
Okay.
So,
well, I'm afraid this is the rules of the quiz. We can't do a redo. So everybody else was correct with ice cream. So well done. Ross, you've got to catch up. We're also, I would love for our audience online, please do remember to put your answers at the bottom in the comment section where you're watching. We're going to move on now to our second question. What is not a universally banned as a food in the European Union? What is not universally banned? Is it A, genetically modified corn? Is it B, chlorine-washed chicken? C, hormone-treated beef? Or D, Asian predatory wasps? A, genetically modified corn, B, chlorine-washed chicken, C, hormone-treated beef, or D, Asian predatory wasps. It's a tough one. I'll give you 5 seconds to think about your answer. Giles is confident in Rome, home of the Food and Agricultural Organization. Ross is looking lost. Ross, go ahead. Tell me, Ross, do you have a question? Yes, Ross, tell me.
yeah. What's C?
C was hormone-treated beef.
I couldn't hear C.
Hormone-treated beef.
Oh, okay.
Okay, time's up. Answer on the plate. We're still waiting on Ross. 3 seconds,
yeah,
Ross.
well,
Okay, perfect. Ready on 3. 3, 2, 1. Let's see your answers. Okay, we've gone A, genetically more. Yeah, Peter's A. D, predatory. What's predatory? Well, I can tell you that Peter in Germany has the correct answer. Peter, what made you choose genetically modified corn? Well done.
Well, honestly, because all of the other ones sounded horrific. And while, genetically modified corn, there are those that are incredibly skeptical of it. It didn't sound as, truly horrible as predatory wasps. I just imagined them being very large.
So corn, it's an unusual case because each country can decide whether or not to approve GM food, and some have. Asian predatory wasps are deemed too dangerous to be bred in Europe. So there we have it. So question 3, this is about Instagram, this question. Who has the most followers on Instagram? Is it A, Ursula von der Leyen, B, Nigel Farage, C, Viktor Orban, or D, Olaf Scholz? Think now. Which one do you think? Yes. Okay, very quickly, Peter's very confident. He's in the lead. Okay, we've got Giles in Rome. Perfect, well done. We've got Paris and Spain. So on the count of 3. 3, 2, 1, reveal your answers. Okay, we've got B. We've got an early, Nigel. Yes, very much in the UK news right now. C. Why did you choose Viktor Orban, Giles?
I think partly because Viktor Orban is very well known over in the US. They have the CPAC conference, the Conservative conference every year in Budapest when a lot of American conservatives come over. So I was thinking maybe, he has a big following in Hungary and Europe, but he must have a lot of followers over in the US as well. That was my logic anyway.
I can see that Peter is nodding along while you're talking, but Peter, you've chosen Mr. Farage. Why did you choose him?
I'm trying to think of a nice way to put it, but he's a man that loves the spotlight, and I imagine he has some kind of media team behind him that would make sure that he's represented fully on the social networks. Yeah, that was my thinking, but I think Giles might have made a very good case for Viktor Orban there.
Well, I can tell you that only one of you has got this answer correct, and that's our correspondent in Madrid. Well done. It's actually Ursula von der Leyen. Are you surprised? Are you surprised? Ken? I mean, you chose her, so I guess not.
I'm not that surprised. I wasn't sure, but you know, Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission for a long time. I mean, she must have a very good reach. I think she's quite active on social media. So yeah, she's been around a long time. I went for Ursula.
Okay, wonderful. So now we're going to move on to our fourth question. Question 4. Which of these is not a protected geographical indication in the European Union? We have A, Belgian waffles, B, Munich beer, C, Irish whiskey, and D, feta cheese. And no pressure, but Ken and Peter are tied at the moment. Okay, Giles is ready, he's confident. Peter's ready. We've got a couple more seconds here, guys, to get ready. Yep, Ken's locked in. Ross, well done. Okay, so on 3, please flip over your answers. 3, 2, 1, go. B, B, C, and A. Okay, interesting. Now, Peter, you're in Germany. What made you think it's B, Munich beer?
Well, I went for this one because I felt that it was a whole of Germany preferential treatment type thing that they have, not just a Munich one, not just a Bavarian one. So let's see if that's worked out for me.
Okay, I'm very sorry, Peter, but I have to tell you that you're wrong. It's actually A, Belgian waffles, which Giles got right there in Rome. Very well done. Gets on the scoreboard. Yes, waffles, geographical indicators need to be closely related to agricultural production. So I'm afraid waffles don't make the cut. So question 5, everybody ready? Final question. How did the French and German presidents start their official dinner when they met last week? Was it with A, brie and caramelized pear tart, that's A, B, asparagus salad and frothed pea milk? Was it C, tomato and hummus crostini? Or D, cured trout tartare with apple and nori?
Can you read them again? What are they?
Sure. So they are A, brie and caramelized pear tart, B, asparagus salad and frothed pea milk, C, tomato and hummus crostini, or D, cured trout tartare with apple and nori. Time's ticking. We've got 2 answers already locked in. A few more moments. Wow. Waiting on Ross in Paris. Okay, he's got his answer. Brilliant. So reveal your answers. 3, 2, 1, go. B, 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 and D. Ross in Paris, why have you picked D? Is that a particularly French starter, do you reckon?
Well, they were over in Germany, but I picked D because I went for trout earlier for the Brussels trouts, so I thought I'd go for trout again.
Okay, wonderful. Ross, this is a very convincing explanation, but I'm afraid you're wrong. And the 3 of you are correct. It was B, it was asparagus. Well done. So Peter and Ken, you're our winners. You tied for joint first. Congratulations. So, of course, for the main course, well done, guys. Very good. Excellent work. I'm afraid we don't have a prize except for your pride for winning. Brilliant. You can have that beer, Peter. Wonderful job. You did excellent. Lovely to see you all. Thanks so much for taking part on this lunch. And for the main course in Germany, they had Sauerbraten, a roast beef marinated in beer. Peter, have you ever tried that before, Sauerbraten?
Yeah, Sauerbraten, very common, typisch on a Deutsche menu. You can find it most places. It actually is ancient. In fact, it's rumored to go back way to to Julius Caesar, who imported beef across the Alps into Germany, soaked in amphoras of wine. Now, many regional variations. If they had the beer version, I'm not quite sure where that would come from. Down in the southwest, in the Rhineland-Pfalz, it's usually soaked in a dry white wine, a dry Riesling overnight, mixed with a bit of vinegar as well to give it that extra little bite. It's where the Sauer in the Sauerbraten comes from. Yeah, very typical German dish. Of course, they went for the asparagus because right now at the moment it is Spargelzeit here in Germany, spargel season, asparagus season, and it's just about anywhere. So that was why that one was an easy one for me to get.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. Thank you, guys. All we hope to see you in person around the dinner table, the lunch table, very soon. Thanks for joining us. And finally, no delicious meal is complete without a digestive. Michael, what can you give us to finish on a tasty note?
Well, Jen, the elections will give us plenty of food for thought, but it seems some people are having a bit of a sugar rush. How about this dancing raccoon? Pedro Sanchez's supporters have adopted this little guy as their unofficial mascot. He appears to dance to a song by Italian singer Raffaella Carrà. Now, Pedro the raccoon is all over TikTok and X. Incredibly, someone has also created a YouTube version that runs for an entire hour. The song is called Pedro, but it's not clear if Sanchez's supporters think their leader bears any resemblance with an actual raccoon.
So that's the end of our Continental Lunch. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you've joined us partway through, don't forget to go back and watch from the beginning for the full lunch experience. And of course, follow the election on our social media accounts at CGTN Europe. Thanks for joining us, and goodbye.